First class is dying around the world. Most countries and airlines have entirely done away with it, opting instead to perfect their business class. In America, there is still one airline maintaining a first class, but not for much longer. Enter American Airlines. Last year I made a video covering their long-haul international first class, but they're also the only airline with a proper domestic first class. And today we checked that product out on one of their longer transcontinental flights out of their New York hub at JFK out to San Francisco, California. First, however, I would be remiss if we didn't take a second to discuss the monstrosity that is JFK Airport. American Airlines flies out of Terminal 8, which was just renovated since the pandemic. Terminal 8 is home to American Airlines and British Airways, but also sees some of their oneworld partners. This is kinda where the setup atrocity begins. Not all oneworld carriers are here. JFK has terminal numbers that go up to 8, but that doesn't mean they have 8 terminals. They only have 5, since Terminals 2, 3, and 6 have all closed in the last 10 to 15 years. Terminal 1 sees the biggest mix of terminals, with airlines from all 3 major alliances and a couple independent carriers. Terminal 4 is the next one, which actually does a great job of housing SkyTeam carriers. Not all of them still, however. Then Terminal 5, which actually manages to be only JetBlue, and the signage shows that off in addition to the famous TWA Hotel. Then Terminal 7, which is home to American's US oneworld counterpart in Alaska Airlines, which offers many connecting journeys on American and other oneworld carriers. Now, with different alliances scattered around, you'll find journeys like flights into JFK on Alaska and departing on British Airways, requiring a terminal change, which isn't uncommon here in JFK or really any other airport. So you just walk over or take a shuttle to your connecting terminal, right? Wrong. You've got to leave security, take the air train to the other terminal, and then pass through security again. So keep that in mind when planning your trips through JFK. That may change soon, however, as JFK has announced and begun major renovations. For starters, Terminal 5 and 8 have been renovated fairly recently along with the Terminal 4 expansion. We're also getting 2 new terminals. Terminal 2 is being used to build up the current Terminal 1, and we're also getting a new Terminal 6. All this should bring the capacity up to meet the demand. I just wonder if the runway, procedure, and air traffic setup will also be able to support it. All I've got to say is that please, if we are renovating the airport, can we please allow for easy connections inside security? Please. Anyways, after our quick airfield tour, we're back at Terminal 8 for our flight, where the first door is the entrance for premium passengers on American and British Airways, both status holders and people ticketed in premium cabins. The check-in area in Terminal 8 is large, with high ceilings to house all the carriers that call this terminal home, in addition to a large mural of New York City on the upper part of the side wall. Along that same wall is the premium check-in. There's one side for business class passengers and oneworld Sapphire members. The other side is for Flagship First Class passengers and oneworld Emerald members. Now, if you've flown in the US, you know that airlines market their business class as first class on most flights, but this route and select others are marketed as Flagship First, as they offer a better seat and level of service. This all starts with check-in, where we see this fully enclosed area with couches, plants, and desks, where you can sit with one of the agents to take care of the checking bags and getting your boarding pass. From there, the back exit dumps us out right at security, which was super calm at this time of day in the early afternoon. Now, the entrance to the gates in Terminal 8 is one of the greatest parts of the new terminal, as it honors the history of American Airlines. For starters, we see the progression of their logo through the years. Speaking of the logo, we have the American Eagle on the floor in front of the Big Apple and Welcome to New York signage. Then in the back is an art installation of an American Airlines plane with decorations of New York and some of their destinations. First stop for us is the lounge. When British Airways moved here from Terminal 7, they and American Airlines built these Flagship Lounges. You'll notice the 3 main lounges, Greenwich, Soho, and Chelsea, all 3 being locations in both New York and London. The Greenwich Lounge is largely a business class lounge. Business class passengers have access along with oneworld Sapphire members on Flagship itineraries only. Then, across the walkway is the stairs up to the Soho and Chelsea lounges. The Soho Lounge is for the highest oneworld status members, accessible to the top tier of British Airways and American Airlines. Oh yeah, and Alaska Airlines, you know, the airline in the adjacent and not connected terminal. The Chelsea Lounge is the lounge for us today, however. It is only accessible for people booked in Flagship first. Status alone won't get you in here. It's got to be a first-class ticket on American or British Airways. The Chelsea Lounge isn't huge, but there's also not many people who can gain access. Honestly, I feel like the size and exclusivity of the space makes it extra cozy. The lounge features seating around the edge of the entire room, anywhere from single seats to groups of 4. Then in the middle of the lounge is a few things, starting with the bar, where you can order things from mixed drinks to coffee. Then was a whole area to get some work done and relax. There's some additional seating around this little fire pit, each seat with more than enough space, and especially power ports. Then in the back, in the middle, is the dining option. It's only this one sit-down area in the Chelsea Lounge, which has breakfast until 11 a.m. and then lunch and dinner. Seating is immediate, and the food comes quick, and it's included in the cost of your ticket. Lastly, on the back, on one side is the showers, and the other houses these little sleep areas with curtain partitions where I took a little nap. If you do want a bigger space or other options to enjoy, you can use any lounge below your ticket level, meaning that first-class passengers can access whatever lounge they please. This comes in handy with the Soho Lounge being up here too, just a few steps away. This is great for people wanting to enjoy some natural lighting and especially some great ramp views. Or possibly maybe you're just looking for a buffet-style dining as opposed to a formal sit-down style. I ended up spending some time in here so that I could enjoy the ramp. Basically, between the two lounges here, you've got about anything you could need. Back to the Chelsea Lounge, it was time for a quick shower before boarding. The shower suites can book up during busy times, but at this time of day I was able to get in without any delays, and it's plenty big enough to house you, your suitcase, and whatever else you need to get ready. Then it was time for our long journey out to our gate. Terminal 8 at JFK has 2 main wings of gates, and of course, I'm in the further of the 2 wings. Fortunately, JFK is a plane spotter's heaven. There's no shortage of different airlines, even if it is specifically a one-world terminal. Anything that you see in this first wing is usually a wide body, making it a little bit more interesting, making the walk somewhat worth it. Underneath the tarmac out to the second wing, we say goodbye to the wide bodies and hello to the narrow body and regional jets. The first thing that we come across when we come up on the other side is the Admirals Club. This is the pay-to-use lounge for American Airlines, or accessible if you hold One World status and are not traveling on a flagship itinerary. I know I just had a bunch of free lounge food, however, I cannot turn down one last Dunkin' coffee before I leave the East Coast and head on my way to Gate 37, which houses my flight to San Francisco. American Airlines boards in groups, first class making up Group 1, meaning essentially that we board right after the pre-boarders. Our A321 soon after was ready for us, and so was the crew, meaning it was time for us to get on board. Now, American has no shortage of A320 family aircraft. What makes these ones so special, however, is that they are only found on flagship routes. Essentially, in the back you have your standard 3-3 setup economy class. Nothing special, limited recline, and actually what I flew out to New York. In front of that cabin, however, is where we find a 2-2 business class, similar to what you'd find on United or Delta's 757s. This aircraft, however, is the only domestic aircraft in the US with a true first-class cabin. In a 1-1 setup, this first-class cabin is unique, not found on any other domestic narrow-body aircraft operating in the United States. I will be in seat 5A, the last seat in the first-class cabin. So, since we're on board first, it gives us plenty of time to look around the seat, starting with the headrest, which is kinda sticky, but it is adjustable and comfortable. The seat itself is super soft, and it just screams old-school American Airlines. There's a little armrest between you and the counter, and above that is where you find the seatback TV remote, the seat controls, and all of your plugs for your headset and personal devices. That is right next to a little storage cubby, which also houses your universal charging port. In front of that is a little more storage, especially once you get in flight. First off, you have the 2 windows at each seat. In addition, you have the fake wood countertop, a design that is very American Airlines in nature. The tray table comes out of there, and it's not huge, but just like with any of these other reverse herringbone seats, coupled with the counter, you do have plenty of space to work while you eat. You do also have extra storage below that, something this seat does not lack. The touchscreen TV in front of you does have to be stowed for takeoff, taxi, and landing, but can be released with this little button. Below that, you have the footrest, which is a nice size, but once again, you can't stow anything there for taxi, takeoff, and landing. As far as the privacy in the seat, you do have the standard reverse herringbone setup, so the seat shell of the seat in front of you backs up to you. Along the aisle, however, there isn't much. We do have an armrest that can be raised, and if you are in a lie-flat mode, it can help. But if you're just sitting, pretty much everyone's gonna see you, your privacy coming more so from the fact that it's only a 10-person cabin. Fortunately, being a narrow body, they do have individual overhead air vents. As far as the amenities, other than a water bottle at the seat, I chose to go with a sparkling wine beverage before departure. The Bang & Olufsen headsets are very nice quality, they're just a little bulky and heavy. We did get one of the older amenity kits which is phasing out on these routes, but it did include the basic eye mask, earplugs, dental kit, socks, and lotions. The bedding, once again, is a style that is being phased out. However, this first class bedding is one of the few things that can rival United. You do have the throw blanket in addition to the full Casper comforter. This goes along with 2 pillows. You have a lumbar support pillow, and you also have a large bedtime pillow. Nothing quite like the gel pillow you can get on United, but this setup is about as close as you can get, surprisingly from another US carrier. As the overhead TVs for the safety video failed to come down completely, it's a great time to mention that the days of this cabin are coming to an end, as is first class as a whole. American Airlines remains the only US carrier to sell first class. We see it on these specific Transcon aircraft as well as their 777-300s, which I put a video out on last year from New York to New Delhi. American has announced plans for a new cabin. Earlier this year, the specific plans were laid out as to how they were moving forward. Essentially, beginning at the tail end of this year, all deliveries of 787-9 aircraft, as well as A321 XLRs, will be coming with the Adient suites. These closed-door suites aren't new. As a matter of fact, on my channel alone, I have videos covering Qatar's 787-9s with these suites, as well as the Hawaiian 787 inaugural, which came with these suites as well. They have had great reviews, even if my marks on it were just so-so. It does make me wonder, however, if American is planning to use the A321 XLRs for their transatlantic hops, something that has become common amongst airlines that have the power to do so, reducing the amount of passengers required to turn a profit, especially on smaller routes. The biggest problem with first class is that the first class seats, especially on American, were most commonly purchased with miles or upgrades, so the airline was giving an upgraded level of service without making any more money. This is kind of the theme, especially amongst North American carriers. The level of product they're able to produce is just not high enough unless they lose money. That's why only the world's biggest airlines amongst business travelers and elites are able to pull off a proper first class. And I'm sorry, American, but you just ain't it. We were given menus for this flight. However, for the short 6-hour transcontinental journey, we will have one main meal after departure and then some snacks and refreshments at the front of the cabin after that. Looking through American Airlines' in-flight entertainment system begins with a mandatory advertisement. Once that's complete, however, we can access the main entertainment menu. Now, American Airlines does have a good spread of movies and TV shows. My favorite part, however, is that they partner with premium channels like HBO and Apple TV in order to get us some of our favorites, something we don't see on any other US carrier. It's how I'm able to watch one of my favorite shows, Ted Lasso, only on board American Airlines. Of course, with selections like this, it's always nice to be able to add things to favorites, making them easier to find later on. I also love the map, which is completely interactive. Not only can you move the main setting here, but you can also choose from a large assortment of other views. American Airlines does offer Wi-Fi on these aircraft. You can connect via their AA in-flight system, and then you can choose from a number of plans. One of the things that I do appreciate is any passenger can get 20 minutes of free internet by watching a sponsored advertisement. After that, you will have to purchase your plans, and they come at varying amounts, whether you're just trying to text someone or you want a full flight pass. You can see here through the speed test that it was actually a pretty strong internet connection. I was actually able to play YouTube videos through this connection, which cannot be said for the majority of in-flight Wi-Fi connections. It didn't take long before it was time for our one and only meal, signaled by the hot towels that were passed out to every passenger. It started off with not only the normal bowl of nuts, but also a bowl of olives, and what makes American so special, the Dr. Pepper. Shortly thereafter, they came by with the tablecloth, which is an intriguing size. The meal started with 2 small plates. First was a seared tuna with black radish, jalapeno, and ponzu sauce, alongside some roasted baby beets, gold and red beets, with crumbled goat cheese. For the main course, I had to go with the beef brisket, as it's pretty on brand for an American carrier. It came in a honey barbecue sauce with succotash and sweet roasted peppers. Then for the dessert, I was excited to try out their sticky toffee pudding, which was absolutely incredible. People give a lot of crap to US carriers for their dining. I will say, however, that y'all better watch out because American seems to have stepped up their game, and as of my last United flight, it seems like they have too. I did want to check out the bed. Even though it's an all-daytime flight and I wasn't planning on sleeping, it doesn't hurt to get comfortable. Using the preset here, we can bring the seat fully flat, and honestly, it is just your standard reverse herringbone seat, so the seat cushion definitely matters, and I find the seat cushion on this to be one of the more comfortable around. The only problem, I'd say, is the cracks that it gives where each piece joins together. Then it was time to make the bed, starting first with our 2 blankets. We have the underneath throw blanket, which is incredibly comfortable, and the overtop comforter, which is incredibly insulating. Altogether, you can give yourself a pretty good night of sleep with these 2. Then we add the 2 pillows. I use the lumbar support along my side and the main pillow like you would with a main pillow. I found them to be extremely comfortable, especially the large pillow. Couldn't really tell the difference between that and anything you'd find at home or in a hotel room. Honestly, I was kind of bummed to not be sleeping on this flight. I'll bet you if you took a red eye in this thing, you would have no problem getting a good night's sleep. I'd say the only problem is the footwell space. If you're on your back, there is plenty of space to move about. However, if you are a side sleeper, you'll find significantly less space for your legs and feet. Once laying flat, we could raise the armrest in order to give us a little more privacy as well from those walking past. Unfortunately, our relatively short journey was coming to a close. However, it gave me time to discuss one of the more strange things out there, which is how the US carriers use the phrase first class. Typically, when you see first class, you picture some closed-door apartment on Emirates, or a 3-room suite on Etihad. In the US, however, first class could be just 2 slightly bigger seats than in economy, maybe with a meal if it's long enough. So why is that? I mean, in Europe that isn't the case, in Asia that isn't the case, but in the US that is the case. The reason dates back to the last century. First class used to be lavish, even in the US's domestic markets. Over time, people just kind of latched onto tradition, making it so that when passengers saw business class, they just associated it with worse service than they could get in first class. And as much credit as I'd like to give the general population, I'm sure that there's enough of a group of people that would choose a different carrier if it had a first class name tag, even if it was the exact same seat. This dates back even to trains, which also had the first and economy cabins only. So the American carriers kind of banded together to maintain the use of first-class phraseology on domestic and some short-haul international routes, even if on the long-haul international routes they go with the flow of things, sticking with a traditional business class naming. There are a couple other exceptions around the globe. Qatar, for example, sells their regional business class seats as first class. If you take a Q suite out of Doha, it's almost always business class. If you take it to somewhere like Dubai or Cairo, however, it's sold and marketed as first class. Even if the seat isn't any better, you do get to access first class amenities. I'll also add that business class was reserved for the larger aircraft. Big enough aircraft for 3 cabin classes and typically only used on the long-haul journeys. The only exception to this is in the premium markets, as they're known. On all 3 major U.S. carriers, on the routes across the country, typically involving San Francisco or Los Angeles, and flying to or from Boston or New York, on these routes you'll find the same branding and marketing as a long-haul business class. United calls it Polaris. Delta calls it Delta One. But take those same planes, same seats, and send them to Denver instead, and the same seats are sold as domestic first. I will say, however, this is a fairly good way to get into a cabin like this for much cheaper. I mean, heck, New York to London is only an hour more than New York to San Francisco. Honestly, I've come to love these seats. I've purchased them and I've booked them with miles. Every time, however, I have been so dang comfortable. Honestly, I think the biggest thing is that it's a 1-1 setup, whereas their business class is a 2-2 on these aircraft. This makes me think the new configuration will help with that problem. Honestly, I'm also a big fan of American's Chelsea Lounge in New York, and I'm very curious about its future with American doing away with its first class. I mean, technically it could remain as British Airways' first class lounge since it's already shared by them. I also wonder if it will just be merged into the Soho Lounge as a lounge for first class and the highest status members. Regardless, it's not the biggest space in the world. I honestly love it mostly for the privacy. As for the onboard product, the seats are similar to a reverse herringbone you'd find on any other international business class. It's just much less common to see these on a domestic narrow-body. The service seems similar to business class as well, but since there's only 10 passengers in this cabin, it's definitely more personal with your flight attendant, which is great if you've got a fun purser. Personally, I don't think we need first class in the world. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed all my first class flights and I would love to do them again, so I do want first class in the world, but I don't think we need it, especially in a time where airlines are perfecting their business classes. Qatar has the Q suites, which are arguably better than their actual first class. Singapore has their giant business class suites, which aren't as good as their first class, but still better than almost every other airline in the world. United and Delta already scrapped their first class, and by the end of the year, American will too. Long story short, if you're trying to fly first class in North America, your days are numbered. Get out to New York and hop on one of these things before they're gone, because pretty soon, first class will fade into the sunset. Let me know your thoughts on it, however. And until next Sunday, safe travels. I'll see y'all next time.